What happens when a heartless bank manager publicly humiliates a woman with Down syndrome, not realizing that Keanu Reeves is watching everything from across the lobby? This shocking encounter went from a moment of cruelty to an unforgettable lesson that changed lives forever. By the time Keanu was done, the entire bank staff was left speechless, and his incredible gesture brought everyone to tears. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. The First National Bank of Westlake stood impressively in the city center, its glass and marble facade gleaming in the morning sunlight. Inside, the atmosphere was one of hushed efficiency. The soft murmur of voices, the gentle clicking of keyboards, the occasional ding of the service bell. It was Tuesday morning, and the bank was moderately busy with the usual mix of business people and regular customers. Among them was 32-year-old Emma Marshall, a woman with Down syndrome who had recently started working at the local flower shop 3 blocks away. The job was her first step toward independence, something she had dreamed about for years. Today was special. Emma had received her first paycheck and had come to the bank to open her very own checking account. Emma waited patiently in line, clutching her documents in a neat folder her mother had prepared. She wore a yellow sundress with a white cardigan, her brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail secured with a daisy clip. Every few minutes, she practiced what she would say to the teller, whispering the words under her breath. "I would like to open a checking account, please. I have my ID and my first paycheck." At the far end of the bank lobby, a man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans sat in one of the waiting areas. His long, dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and he wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Despite his attempt to remain inconspicuous, a few customers had done double takes, wondering if they were really seeing Keanu Reeves in their local bank. They were. Keanu was in town filming his latest project and had stopped by the bank to handle some personal business. His financial advisor had arranged for him to meet with the branch manager in private, but he'd arrived early and decided to wait in the lobby rather than draw attention by asking for special treatment. As Emma finally reached the front of the line, she approached the teller window with a bright smile. "Good morning. I would like to open a checking account, please. I have my ID and my first paycheck," she announced proudly, just as she had practiced. The young teller, barely out of college, looked up from his computer. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Emma, and his professional smile faltered. Do you have someone with you today?" he asked hesitantly. Emma's smile dimmed a little. "No, I came by myself. I took the bus. I'm working now at Bloom's flower shop." She pushed her folder forward. "I have everything I need right here." The teller glanced around uncomfortably before leaning forward and speaking in a lowered voice. "I think you might need to have a parent or guardian with you to open an account." "I'm 32 years old," Emma replied, her voice steady but tinged with disappointment. "My mum says I can open my own account." By now, a line had formed behind Emma. A few people shifted impatiently, checking their watches and sighing audibly. The teller's discomfort grew. "Let me get my manager," he said finally, pressing a button beneath his counter. A moment later, a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit approached. Richard Dawson had been the branch manager for 8 years. With his perfectly styled silver hair and perpetual frown, he ruled the bank with cold efficiency, caring more about numbers than people. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, not addressing Emma directly but looking at the teller instead. "This customer wants to open an account, sir," the teller explained, glancing nervously at Emma. Dawson finally turned to look at Emma, taking in her appearance with a quick, dismissive glance. "I'm sorry, but we can't help you today," he said briskly. "You'll need to come back with a legal guardian or caretaker who can manage the account for you." Emma's smile disappeared completely. "But I don't need a guardian. I'm an adult. I can sign my name and everything." To demonstrate, she opened her folder and pointed to where she had already signed several forms in neat, careful handwriting. Dawson's expression hardened. "Young lady, banking regulations are complex. You clearly don't have the capacity to understand financial responsibilities." The cruel words hung in the air. Several customers in line looked down at their feet, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The teller stared fixedly at his computer screen. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. "I work hard at the flower shop. Mrs. Bloom says I'm her best employee. I know how to count money and make change." Dawson's patience visibly thinned. "This is holding up the line. We have customers with actual business to conduct." His voice had risen, carrying clearly across the now silent lobby. "I cannot allocate staff resources to explain basic banking concepts to someone who won't comprehend them." Emma's hands began to tremble, her carefully organized papers shaking. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I just wanted my own account," she whispered. From across the lobby, Keanu Reeves had witnessed the entire exchange. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he watched the manager's callous treatment of Emma. Without drawing attention to himself, he stood up and walked slowly toward the teller windows. "Excuse me," he said quietly, stepping next to Emma. The manager looked up irritably, ready to tell another customer to wait their turn, until recognition dawned on his face. His mouth opened slightly, no words coming out. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation," Keanu continued, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "And I'm wondering why this woman is being denied service at your bank." The lobby fell completely silent. Those who hadn't recognized him before certainly did now. Cell phones discreetly emerged from pockets, recording the unexpected confrontation. Dawson smoothed his tie nervously. "Mr. Reeves, what an honor. I assure you we're not denying service. We simply require proper procedures for..." He glanced at Emma, searching for a diplomatic term. "Special cases." Keanu's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "Special cases," he repeated slowly. "You mean customers with Down syndrome?" Emma looked up at Keanu, recognition dawning on her face. "You're John Wick," she whispered in awe. A ghost of a smile touched Keanu's lips as he looked at her. "Just a friend today," he said gently before turning back to Dawson. "I'd like to understand exactly which banking regulation prevents an adult with Down syndrome from opening her own bank account." Dawson swallowed hard. "Well, there are concerns about financial competency and decision-making capacity." "Really?" Keanu interrupted. "Because I know quite a bit about banking regulations, and I'm not familiar with any that discriminate based on how someone looks or what chromosome variations they might have." The manager's face flushed red. "Mr. Reeves, I assure you we're simply looking out for her best interests." "Are you?" Keanu asked, his voice still quiet but now carrying an edge that made everyone in the vicinity straighten. "Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you were publicly humiliating a customer who came in with all the proper documentation, simply because you made assumptions about her abilities." He turned to Emma. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her folder. She nodded, handing it to him with wide eyes. Keanu carefully reviewed the contents: her ID, social security card, paycheck, and the pre-filled application forms, all meticulously organized. "Everything seems to be in perfect order," he observed, handing the folder back to Emma before facing Dawson again. "So I'll ask once more. What's the actual reason you're refusing to serve this customer?" By now, every employee in the bank had stopped what they were doing to watch. The tellers, the loan officers, even the security guard by the door stood frozen, sensing they were witnessing something significant. Dawson's professional demeanor cracked completely. "Mr. Reeves, perhaps we can discuss this in my office." "I think we should discuss it right here," Keanu replied firmly, "where this woman was humiliated publicly. Unless you have a valid reason to deny her service, I believe she deserves an apology and assistance with opening her account." A new voice joined the conversation. An older woman who had been working at a desk near the back of the lobby approached. Her name tag identified her as Margaret Wilson, Assistant Manager. "I'd be happy to help with opening an account," she said, addressing Emma directly with a warm smile. "And Mr. Dawson," she added, turning to her boss with a firm expression. "There is absolutely no regulation preventing Ms. Marshall from opening and managing her own account. In fact, denying her that right could be considered discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act." The color drained from Dawson's face. "I was merely suggesting—" "You were suggesting that I'm stupid," Emma interrupted, finding her voice again. The lobby fell silent once more. "But I'm not stupid. I'm different. There's a difference." Keanu nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Couldn't have said it better myself." Margaret gestured toward her desk. "Ms. Marshall, if you'd like to come with me, I'll help you open that account right away." Emma hesitated, looking up at Keanu. "Would you come too? Please?" Something in her simple request seemed to touch him deeply. "I'd be honored," he replied. As they walked toward Margaret's desk, the customers in the bank broke into spontaneous applause. Emma's face lit up with surprise and joy, while Keanu ducked his head slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. For the next 30 minutes, Margaret patiently walked Emma through every step of opening her account. She explained each form, each banking feature, each responsibility, never once speaking down to Emma or showing any doubt in her ability to understand. Throughout the process, Keanu sat quietly beside Emma, occasionally asking a clarifying question to ensure she understood all her options. Meanwhile, Richard Dawson retreated to his office, the door closing firmly behind him. Through the glass walls, people could see him making agitated phone calls, his face still flushed with embarrassment. When everything was finally complete, Emma proudly held her new debit card and account information folder. "Thank you," she said to Margaret, and then turned to Keanu. "And thank you for being my friend today." Keanu smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. That's what friends do. They stand up for each other. As they walked back across the lobby, Keanu seemed to make a decision. He stopped at the teller window where Emma had first been rejected and asked for the manager. Richard Dawson emerged reluctantly from his office. "I'd like to make a deposit," Keanu said simply. Dawson personally handled the transaction, his hands shaking slightly as Keanu handed him a check. "Please deposit this into Emma Marshall's new account," Keanu instructed. "Consider it a congratulations gift for her first job." Emma gasped as she caught sight of the amount, $10,000. "I can't take that," she protested. "It's too much." Keanu shook his head. "It's not a gift from me," he explained cryptically. "It's an investment in your future. Someday when you're able, you might invest in someone else's future too." Tears welled in Emma's eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. She suddenly threw her arms around Keanu in a spontaneous hug. After a moment of surprise, he hugged her back. "Promise me something," he said quietly. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel less valuable just because you're different." "I promise," Emma replied solemnly. As they parted ways at the bank entrance, Emma turned back one last time. "I'm going to be the best bank customer ever," she declared. "And when I have saved enough money, I'm going to open my own flower shop." Keanu smiled. "I'll be first in line to buy flowers." What no one in the bank knew was that before leaving, Keanu had quietly spoken with Margaret Wilson. By the end of the day, Richard Dawson was placed on administrative leave pending review of his conduct. 2 weeks later, the bank announced a new initiative partnering with the local Down Syndrome Association to offer financial literacy workshops, and Margaret Wilson was promoted to branch manager. 6 months later, when Keanu's film premiered in the city, the theater received a special delivery, elaborate flower arrangements for the entire cast, with a card that simply read, From your friend at Bloom's Flower Shop, Emma. And tucked into one arrangement, meant only for Keanu, was a single daisy and a note. Thank you for seeing me when others looked away. Sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come not from grand gestures, but from simply recognizing the humanity in each person we meet. In a world that often values the wrong things, Keanu Reeves showed what truly matters, not fame, not wealth, but the courage to stand up for those who need someone to stand beside them. If you were moved by this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth today. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their differences. And sometimes, heroes walk among us in the most unexpected places, even at your local bank. What would you have done if you witnessed this situation? Let us know in the comments below.